We're here with Steve Raid. We're so thankful that you've joined us and you've taken a little time to answer some difficult questions. We think they're challenging questions for atheists to answer. We're talking earlier with an atheist, and we asked, some very basic questions because we're at a reason rally, right? And so this rally is about reason, or it claims to be a reasonable rally. As an atheist, and you are an atheist.
Totally, 100%.
You've supported this rally before?
I've supported the last one financially. I support a number of atheist organizations. I'm an equal opportunity financial supporter of atheist organizations.
Okay, now Stephen, as an atheist, can you give us the basis for, let's say, something like morality? One of your speakers' name is Lawrence Krauss.
Yes,
Krauss. He's, Dr. Krauss says that he says in a speech that he gave, you are stardust. How does stardust have morals?
Stardust doesn't have morals.
So we don't have morals? Morals are irrelevant?
We absolutely have morals. They're created by people. In other words, animals don't have morals because they don't have a consciousness or a will to create morals. We as humans do, and create the morals that we want. And those morals change from decade to decade, just like Christian theology has changed. I remember growing up where you couldn't eat fish on a Friday, or you had to eat fish, I forget which, but the Pope changed that, and a variety of changes.
So then they're mere conventions of man?
Total conventions of man.
So if the laws of logic or laws of morality in this case are conventions, why is anybody obligated to follow them?
No one's obligated to follow them. It just makes sense for society to get along with each other, to create some rules that generally will keep us safe and secure and enjoy a long life.
So then ultimately you can't really account for morality other than to say that they're mere conventions of man, creations of man. So what you're saying is that before men came up with these conventions, that it was permissible to commit acts, let's say, of genocide or molestation?
I think before man came up with the rules of better living, people took advantage for their own purposes to do anything they wanted to do.
That was totally okay? That wasn't immoral for them to do that?
Well, it's quite immoral if you use morals as a basis. It also shortens their life, which I think we're all here to survive. That's the essential point of life, to survive. It's the way nature made it.
Bertrand Russell said that life was meaningless. Do you agree with him?
I think we give it meaning. It doesn't start out with any meaning. There's no newborn that has any meaning. Meaning is what we put into someone's mind.
So when you die, life will cease to be meaningful?
You will degrade biologically as what you are, a piece of biology.
So given this worldview, is there really a cause for a person to view themselves, A, as meaningful, and B, to live life with dignity, knowing that life is actually, in terms of reality, meaningless?
Well, number one, I never said that life is meaningless. Life is very meaningful if you give it meaning. Some people choose not to. Some people choose to. So therefore, it's up to the individual.
So can you see why, as a non-atheist, as a theist, as a Christian theist, why we have problems with the atheist worldview? Because in our estimation, if life is in reality, not pragmatically or conventionally, but in reality, meaningless, other than the meaning that you give to it, that life is certainly not a life that you can actually live out in reality. Isn't that true?
No, not true at all. Not even a little bit.
So you think it would be you think it would be useful for a person to live as a fatalistic, nihilistic individual in society that cares nothing about consequences or ideas?
I don't think it's a good way to live. I'm sure some people do. But, as an atheist, all you're giving up is the belief that there's some supreme being. You're not giving up morality. You're not giving up working with other people, regardless of what they believe in. As long as it works to ensure your safety, security, and longest life possible, you do that.
Now, you made an appeal to, you don't think that's a good way to live. In an atheist worldview, what is good?
What is good is what makes you and other people happy and cooperative and improves the state of the world. That's good.
And so, who determines the standard of that goodness?
Each individual has to determine their own standard, just as religion has its people that agree and disagree with each other. It's no
so then that doesn't establish or give us any sort of rule of morality. So in other words, at the end of the day, if a pedophile thinks, let's say they belong to NAMBLA, they believe it increases their happiness to be pedophiles. Who is the atheist to deny that pedophile their right?
I think the law of which atheists are a part of decide what is acceptable and not acceptable in human behavior, and we punish people, regardless of their religion or non-religion, for breaking society's rules.
So once society rules that pedophilia is acceptable, it will de facto make pedophilia right?
I don't think that's ever going to happen, but if you're talking on a theoretical...
Happens every day in the Middle East.
Well, it might, but that's certainly not here. And at this point of human society, we can't control what the rest...
So as an atheist, are you prepared to live with the consequences of saying that, in fact, child molestation is not morally wrong?
No, I'm not personally willing to live that way, and I think most people are not.
But are you willing to accept philosophically that that's where you are?
I'm willing to accept philosophically that anything is right or wrong, only thinking makes it so. Those words were coined by Shakespeare, and they're very true. I will get a medal for killing 1,000 ISIS members, and I'll go to jail for shooting this girl running by. So it's a matter of what society thinks is right or wrong. Some members of society feel I should go to jail for killing 1,000 members of ISIS. That's where the law comes in. So we look to follow the law and hope society follows the laws and changes as human beings change their ideas.
Correct, but you do not. But you do acknowledge that when you have morals that are relative, even something like pedophilia is not something that you can actually objectively condemn.
When you talk about moral relativism, which is what I think you're talking about...
We're Stardust, remember? So how does Stardust, and you said you agree, how does Stardust have morality?
Stardust is a physical thing. It's not conscious, it's not human.
Are morals physical?
No, morals are conscious driven. And
so they're not, are they material or immaterial?
They're immaterial, yes. We give them materiality by following them, but they're essentially immaterial.
So they're abstract, not physical?
Yeah, it's like God created out of nothing, supposedly, according to the Christian myth, a world in 7 days. In other words, he took a bunch of stardust or chaos, which was nothing, and created a world, supposedly.
Now, Stephen, is it possible that as an atheist that you are mistaken in your atheism? Is it possible that you're wrong?
Not possible.
It's not possible. How do you know that for certain?
Because I know that 2 and 2 is 4. I know.
How do you know that?
I know that I learned it, and it makes sense as I add things together. I gave something that's this big 2 and this big 4, and they work together and solve problems.
But isn't mathematics based on reason?
Mathematics is based on reason, yes.
How do you know your reason is valid?
Only because I understand basic physics. All things are made of atoms.
But don't you use your reason to understand physics?
Yes, I do.
So how do you know your reason is valid before you interpret any data whatsoever?
Well, reality keeps changing, or our understanding of reality keeps changing as we get more knowledge.
But you have to use reason to know that reality changes, correct?
Yes, you have to use reason.
So then, is the atheist argument for the laws of logic or reason in this point is that reason is reasonable because reason is reasonable?
That sounds a little convoluted.
Sounds viciously circular.
Yeah, very circular. I don't know that I buy into that.
Do you have a different argument? Because that's just, unless I misunderstood you, that's pretty much what you're saying.
I don't have an argument. I have an understanding of fact, scientific fact, that yes, we're all made of stardust, and so is this earth that we're standing on, and we'll end up back as we started, and whatever happens in between, we create ourselves based on what we believe at the time, and those beliefs are constantly changing. There was a time there was no such thing as Christianity. Then there became a time, and then there'll become a time where there is no Christianity. And it's all an evolving set of beliefs that ultimately will all end us up in the same place anyway. Stardust. That's reality.
Now, Stephen, you made an appeal to several things there, like, the fact that that we came from Starbucks, that that we'll return to stardust. All of those things assume the basis of reason. All of those things assume the laws of logic. So then what you're saying basically is that atheism cannot account for the laws of logic, because unless I'm mistaken, you didn't give me a basis for logic or reason, or you cannot account for why you are actually rational.
The basics of logic are my eyes, my ears, my brain, and when they all work together to show facts that can be replicated and proven, they stand as reality. That's what creates reality.
But isn't so? The two things that you're appealing to there is your reason and your senses, right? Because you're talking about what you can observe and also what you reason. Mm-hmm. But our question is a bit more fundamental. How do you know your reason and your senses are valid?
I'm born with them, and they work for me.
Now, have you heard of the logical fallacy called begging the question?
I've heard the words begging the question. Yeah.
Well, begging the question is basically when you simply assert the same argument again as a response, but you don't actually give a rational basis for the argument. You just kind of repeat the argument in a different way.
Thank you, because that cleared up exactly what I was thinking that you've been doing for the last few minutes, begging the question. You have an agenda.
How so?
It sounds like you have an agenda that either willfully misunderstands the atheist point of view, or willfully assumes that whatever point of view you hold is valid, and therefore the questions are begging the question.
Well, I haven't given you really much about what I believe. I've just been asking you questions about the atheist worldview, and I'm still wondering if atheists can account for reason. We are at a reason rally.
Yes, we are, and it's a pretty nice day, and it's going to be a great rally, and I'm so happy to be a part of it.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much for the interview. The reason why we're not atheists and we're Christian theists is because we believe, and we know we disagree, but we believe, Stephen, that as Christians, only we can account for where we get laws of logic, laws of morality, where we get meaning, morals, and beauty, only if they are given to us from a transcendent source of truth like God. And because God has given us these things, we're able to be rational. So our argument for the existence of God is that without Him, you couldn't know or prove anything. So
making the question that there is a God. You have no more, I have more proof that we're stardust than you have proof that there's a God.
When something
point to a God, you can't. There's no materiality to a God.
Yeah, we never said God was material.
Well, you're making an assumption that something exists that you can't prove. So that's called a belief, and you're entitled to beliefs. But then you get into, well, what belief's the right belief? Is the Islamic belief the right one? The Jewish one? The Christian one? How about the Scientologists? Everyone's got a belief. Is it yours that's the only one? Whatever that belief is yours the number one and the other 99 don't count? You get into a very heavy situation where it all becomes nonsense, because who's to say which one's right and which one isn't?
Of course, I mean that's called the conflict of worldviews. We each have to. We're in a world where we have competing worldviews, and obviously our worldview is based on revelation from God. We do believe the Bible is revelation from God, and because God has given us His revelation, we can know certain things absolutely for certain. But again, unless you have a different answer, I don't think atheism so far in our day, the day that we've been going around talking with people, can account for things like morality, can account for human dignity, can account for things like laws of logic, especially, as you have asserted, we are all stardust.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. From what little I know, and I assume you're Catholic?
No, I'm a Christian.
Christian. All right. I don't know the difference. I just assume it all believes in Christ, and there's a church, and that church can be one of a variety of different churches of the different sects of Catholicism, I'm assuming.
No, sir. I'm a I'm a Christian. I'm a Protestant Christian that follows in the tradition of the Protestant reformers like Calvin and Luther and Zwingli and those folks. We broke away from the Catholic Church precisely because the Catholic Church under the papacy was corrupted. So I am not a Catholic. I am an historic Christian.
I got it. I get that distinction. But for my own education, you have a church?
Yes, sir.
You have pastors and things?
Yes, sir.
And their kids are groomed from an early age for the morality that you teach?
Yes, sir.
Your religion? Has there been any abuse of children in your church?
Absolutely not.
None whatsoever.
If there were any that we knew, we'd report it to the authorities immediately.
Okay, so in history that has not happened in your church.
In our local church, absolutely not. In Christian, well, of course, but you know, as a Christian, the question that I would come back with, Stephen, would be simple. It would be, if we're all stardust, what does it matter if we mistreat children?
I think it would matter to the children that are mistreated.
If they're just stardust, why should it?
If they're unhappy in this life, in these 80 years that there's given to them, I think that's a wrong.
Don't you see that as an arbitrary standard for stardust? How does stardust, number one, how does stardust have any sort of consciousness of morality outside of a mere convention? If it's a convention, that really what you're saying is that really it doesn't comport to reality.
I think you're overplaying the word stardust as having anything more than a material piece of sand. What happens to that stardust is no different than if a sculptor put a statue up that's beautiful. It was stardust when it started, and now it's a beautiful sculpture. A human being is a beautiful sculpture.
How does stardust account for beauty?
Well,
aesthetics is a philosophy. How does stardust acquire the philosophy of aesthetics?
Well, beauty is a matter of opinion. I happen to think that this lady that's filming me here is a very cute woman. That's a matter of opinion. And I might think some other person is, whatever, not so cute. This is what consciousness does for us, allows us this. This is not stardust. This is what I've become through stardust. It's assembled me into who I am. So we need to talk about where we are now, not what our original source was, because that begs the question that you're nothing.
So atheism doesn't have any regard for metaphysics?
I don't understand metaphysics.
Well, metaphysics is
a little airy-fairy, so to speak. I don't know.
Well, actually, if you go study philosophy, you're going to study metaphysics. Metaphysics is just your theory of reality.
Oh, okay. All right.
So how does the undergirding reality of atheism conform to what we see around us? What we see a moral universe, we see a logical universe, we see a society that lives out a worldview that indicates that we're dealing with rational, moral, and ethical type creatures. But if the atheist metaphysic is that in fact morality doesn't exist, why are we living moral to begin with?
First of all, you made a statement that atheists don't believe morality exists.
Not metaphysically. In other words, you said that they're conventions of man.
Yeah, they are conventions of man. Morality, very important. You can't have a good society without morality. Has to be rules, generally agreed to by all, but not agreed to by 100%. That's why we have genocides, and that's why we have killings and all kinds of other bad things, because some people don't subscribe to the same level of morality. Whether they be Christians or Jews or Muslims, they have a variety of opinions. Atheists only have one difference. They reject all of the bull, all the crap that has no meaning, that's based in belief rather than the reality. The reality is we're here, we create our own morality, and the other folks who rely on religion, each one believes what they believe and rejects the other 99, and that's no solution for a better world.
Well, don't you know, Stephen, that the obvious answer coming back is if truth is relative, right, and metaphysically we cannot establish that morality exists, what's the point in believing in distinctions like what you believe versus what I believe? Ultimately, it doesn't matter. It is, as John Paul Sartre said, that if God does not exist, everything is permissible. Or it is as many other, like Bertrand Russell said, life is absolutely meaningless because, in fact, we're living in a chance universe. If we're living in a chance universe, why do we have meaning?
Number one, you're cherry picking a couple old philosophers, and
Bertrand Russell's pretty contemporary.
well, they're all intelligent people, no doubt, but you're cherry picking a couple statements, and you could probably take 50 statements that are opposite to those two. I would say that we're living in a society with a lot of morals, some following, some not, forever changing those morals. Last year's morals are different from this year's morals. Your belief in gay or lesbian might have been way different 20 years ago than it is today. So we evolve, and we will continue to evolve, and evolve as atheists, okay? Because we don't put our belief in some fixed book or deity that we can't prove existed, and we're putting words in that deity's mouth.
Anything else? Anything else to? So, Stephen, okay, now that you say you're God, I mean, are you omniscient? Omnipotent?
No, I'm not.
Omnipresent?
I'm not omnipotent, omniscient, or omnipresent.
So how do you define God?
I define God as the ruler of my universe.
That's not the proper, acceptable philosophical definition of God. You won't find that in any encyclopedia or dictionary of philosophy or religion.
That's true, you might not, but
You will not.
it's a very practical way of living your life, in believing you're in control of what you believe.
Is everybody else entitled to believe that they're God?
They are entitled. Yes.
If you're God, that means you set the rules, and so the pedophile can be God and molest children with impunity?
No, you can only set the rules for yourself, and if society disagrees with those rules, you end up in jail. So
Well, maybe the pedophile wants to be in jail. Maybe that's part of his sick, demented way of life as a god.
that's quite possible, and that's
That's a scary conclusion to come to, Stephen, as a worldview. I'll tell you that right now. Anything else you want to say? Last point.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Enjoy the Reason Rally, and let's both have fun with it, whichever way we believe.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.